Alright everyone, today let's dive into the story of Miss Manami, who is super traditional and kind of a bookworm. To save her student who's obsessed with gigolos and constantly hanging out at bars, our teacher takes her first ever step into that tempting world. Little did she know, she'd unexpectedly fall head over heels for a handsome gigolo who's a whole decade younger. Manami is a quiet and introverted person, and her daily life just goes by in a boring and dull way. At school, she's a homeroom teacher that students don't really like. No matter how hard she tries to teach, not a single student below is willing to listen. Finally, Manami couldn't take it anymore, so she confiscated an extracurricular book from a female student. The student wouldn't let go, and the two struggled, causing Manami to lose her footing and fall. The student took this opportunity to move a chair, causing Manami's forehead to hit the corner of the table hard, leaving a scar. After work, Manami went to meet a blind date arranged by her father. The guy noticed her family's financial situation and also felt that someone as average as her would be perfect for marriage. But he only cared about one thing. Being over 30 and still having to rely on family to set up a blind date seemed a bit embarrassing. He wanted Manami to lie and say that they met on a trip or at some event. Manami, a straightforward person, didn't want to cooperate. She bluntly said that a man who wants to marry her but doesn't even notice the scar on her forehead isn't a qualified husband. The man then made excuses. Suddenly, Manami got a call from a school saying that a female student had secretly taken her parents' card and was spending money at a gigolo bar. The principal requested that she and the assistant homeroom teacher immediately go there to bring the student back. This was the first time Manami had ever set foot in a gigolo bar. Faced with the strange and colorful scene in the bar, she felt extremely awkward. Quickly, she saw the female student leaning on a gigolo wearing a red shirt and immediately rushed over to pull her away. However, the female student was very attached to the gigolo in the red shirt and refused to leave. The two of them struggling caused a commotion. Coincidentally, the red shirt gigolo's colleagues were celebrating a birthday and were unhappy about having their atmosphere ruined. So they demanded that the red shirt gigolo manage his customers better. The red shirt gigolo immediately carried the female student into a private room, and Manami followed closely behind. Inside the room, Manami harshly lectured the female student, making her understand that as a student, it was wrong to waste her parents' money. Then, she turned to the gigolo in the red shirt, criticizing him for treating women as tools for making money, saying his behavior was shameless and despicable. Seeing that the female student was still infatuated, Manami ordered the assistant homeroom teacher to forcibly take the student away, while she herself accidentally fell, giving the gigolos a good laugh. A tiring and busy day passed, and by the time Manami got home, she was exhausted. Her father hurriedly asked about the results of the blind date. He said that he was the son of his colleague, and his character was definitely not a problem, and that this time she could definitely get married. Seeing that her father also didn't notice the scar on her forehead, Manami angrily said that she had gone to a gigolo bar, but her father didn't believe it at all. In his eyes, his traditional daughter would absolutely not do anything so outrageous, and he just thought she was joking. The next day, Manami went to work as usual. The mother of that female student came to the school again, complaining that the school hadn't educated her daughter well, and demanded that the school make that gigolo write a written guarantee, ensuring that he would no longer receive her daughter. This task naturally fell to Manami. Manami called the red shirt gigolo named Taiga, asking him to cooperate and write the guarantee. Taiga took this opportunity to threaten her, saying that unless she came to the bar as his customer once, he would absolutely not agree. Helpless, Manami dragged her best friend, who is a reporter, along for courage, and went to the gigolo bar once again. After meeting, one was conservative and cautious, and the other deliberately teased, and the atmosphere between the two was like oil and water. Manami took out paper and pen and demanded that Taiga write it immediately. However, Taiga reasoned that it was too noisy in the bar and suggested going back to his dorm to write it and then send it to the school. Manami had no choice but to let it go for the time being. After that, Manami continued to meet her blind date. The guy felt that she was an honest woman. Manami frankly admitted that she wasn't an honest person, and the story she told about having been in love before was also a lie. Then, she talked about her experiences at her old company, having dated a colleague and planned to get married, but then the colleague fell in love with someone else. She was unwilling to accept it, so she stalked, blocked his path, and made harassing phone calls until the colleague reported her to the police. This story spread everywhere, and she was forced to quit her job, becoming so depressed that she made an extreme choice. Fortunately, she was rescued and spent a year at home, and finally, at her father's request, she took the teacher's certification exam and got her current job. After telling this past, Manami said that the blind date wasn't her type and suggested ending the meeting. A week passed by in the blink of an eye, and Manami still hadn't received the written guarantee. She had to find Taiga again. This time, Manami laid out paper and pen, demanding that Taiga write it right in front of her. Taiga had no way to refuse, so he had to pick up the pen and seriously put pen to paper. When Manami looked at the masterpiece after it was done, she froze. Taiga's handwriting was crooked, full of spelling mistakes, and he didn't even know how to write his own name. Taiga explained that he didn't have parents since he was little and was a freeloader who only knew how to eat and play. He didn't get much schooling and now had to earn money to support his blood-sucking mother and sick younger brother. After hearing this, Manami felt extremely sympathetic. She wrote Taiga's name on the paper and told him to practice writing along with each stroke. Taiga studied very hard, and Manami guided him with great dedication. Just like that, after writing it over and over again, Taiga finally learned how to write his name and rewrote a complete guarantee. During this process, they both felt very happy and proud. As they laughed and talked happily, the atmosphere suddenly became ambiguous. Unexpectedly, Taiga reached out and stroked Manami's hair, asking if the wound on her forehead was better. Actually, Taiga had noticed that scar the first time Manami visited the bar. Before Manami could answer, Taiga suddenly leaned in and gently placed a kiss on her wound. Manami was startled and pushed him away, but then she sat down on the ground, smiling shyly. After completing the task, Manami brought the written guarantee to the principal. After reading it, the principal was furious, scolding Taiga's handwriting for being so terrible, proving that he wasn't serious at all. Manami, who was usually shy, responded decisively this time. Taiga wrote it very seriously, and I believe he sincerely wants to change. As soon as she finished speaking, even Manami didn't understand why she believed Taiga so much. Perhaps it was during the time she taught Taiga how to write that she felt the joy of teaching for the first time. But what Manami didn't know was that Taiga was currently reporting to his boss that he had hooked a high school teacher who was both naive and from a wealthy family, and that he would definitely do everything he could to take down this prey. The girl, after learning that Taiga had to write a guarantee promising not to contact her again, became angry, pushed Manami, and ran out of the school. Manami looked for the girl everywhere, but couldn't find her, so she had to call Taiga to ask. Taiga took this opportunity to demand that Manami come see him, saying that he would only reveal the girl's whereabouts after they met. Manami hurriedly ran to the meeting point and saw the girl playing games with Taiga. After Taiga left, the girl told Manami what Taiga had said to her. She decided to listen to Taiga's advice and study hard, relieved of the burden in her heart. She even shared snacks with Manami. Manami imitated Taiga earlier, throwing the snack package high up and opening her mouth to catch it, making the girl burst out laughing. The distance between the two was immediately narrowed. This was the first time Manami had received recognition from a student, and she didn't expect this recognition to come thanks to Taiga. On the weekend, while Manami was helping her best friend move, the blind date sent a message saying that he didn't mind her past and still wanted to marry her. Manami wasn't moved by the blind date, but at the same time, she felt that marrying a man who didn't care about her past might not be a bad choice. She was confused and didn't know whether to agree or not. Seeing this, her best friend told Manami to call the blind date over, intending to help her check him out. When the blind date arrived, her best friend interrogated him extensively, questioning why he wanted to marry Manami. The blind date spoke honestly, saying that he felt Manami was honest and trustworthy, and that he had been missing her ever since their meetings. Manami kept brainwashing herself, believing that the meaning of marriage might be to find a trustworthy man to live with, and that love wasn't necessary. When the blind date took Manami home, he confessed that he had never been in love, and that the women he had contacted in the past had always rejected him with various reasons. Manami believed this completely, but she didn't know that this man was lying through his teeth. After their previous meeting, he immediately went to a hotel with a woman for some fun. The blind date also pretended to be deeply in love, saying that Manami was the first woman to make him want to get married and that he wanted to go upstairs to meet Manami's parents. Manami, with a compromising attitude and a sigh, took the blind date home. Her father was very satisfied with the progress of the two and immediately urged them to set a wedding date. The blind date added that he had made an appointment to go to the jewelry store to choose a ring. Manami's parents praised the blind date for working efficiently, although Manami was unhappy that he did things first and then told her later. She couldn't blame him because of her parents' reaction, so she could only continue to brainwash herself, thinking that the whole family was happy and harmonious. And perhaps this was happiness. A few days later, Manami and the blind date went to the jewelry store they had booked in advance and coincidentally met Taiga there. It turned out that Taiga had been noticed by a wealthy woman who often visited the store. He knew that this woman was a regular customer of the store's most famous star, so according to the rules, he didn't want to compete for customers. But that star didn't mind the woman noticing Taiga, and the boss also said that as long as the customer and the star both agreed, Taiga could decide whether to serve the woman himself. In order to become the best salesperson, Taiga accepted the challenge of serving the woman. Soon, the woman took him shopping everywhere. Manami tried to ignore the complex emotions she felt when she saw Taiga. After buying the ring with a blind date, he said that the two of them were now officially engaged, and that he had booked a room at the hotel upstairs, and that it was okay if Manami didn't want to. Manami gritted her teeth and agreed. The two walked hand in hand into the elevator, coincidentally sharing it with Taiga and the woman, making the atmosphere extremely awkward. Manami turned to talk to the blind date, and Taiga also deliberately teased the woman in order to break the embarrassment. When they got to the room, when Manami suggested ordering food, the blind date pretended to look for the menu, and then suddenly hugged her when Manami wasn't paying attention. Manami was startled, and in the struggle, she accidentally fell and hit the table. Not only was her body uncomfortable and unable to bear intimate actions, but psychologically, she also felt that everything was happening too fast to accept. The blind date couldn't restrain his desire and secretly made an appointment with his lover to come to the hotel. And he loudly stated that he needed a wife only to be able to confidently see his lover. Meanwhile, the woman kept hinting and urging Taiga, but Taiga was panicking inside and couldn't act. The woman suspected that Taiga thought she was old and didn't want to be with an old woman like her. So she angrily threw wine in Taiga's face and then threw another glass of wine over his head. Before leaving, she warned Taiga that she would find him again in the future and that if he wanted to be a star, he had to try his best. After showering, Taiga received the steak that the woman had ordered. When the waiter asked him to sign, he was going to write it quickly to get it over with. But then he suddenly remembered the scene of Manami teaching him how to write. He carefully wrote his name on the napkin. When he got home, he called Manami and made an appointment to meet. The two went to the rooftop where they had written the guarantee last time and told each other about the people they had been to the hotel with. Manami explained that he was her fiancé. Taiga frankly said that the other person was a customer of the store. Manami thanked Taiga for his help in getting her student back on track. Taiga was also touched and said that his childhood dream was to be a tram driver. But unfortunately, when he grew up, he didn't even know how to write, let alone take a driver's license test. Manami's teacher, Blood, suddenly rose, and she told Taiga to write his name to see if he still remembered. Seeing that Taiga's handwriting was better than last time, Manami felt extremely proud and actively offered to tutor Taiga privately, teaching him every day. Taiga, to repay Manami's kindness, decided to teach Manami what he was best at. Manami officially started teaching Taiga, starting with the most basic strokes. During the process of contact, the two's personalities clearly showed their differences. Manami, who was originally picky, couldn't help but sometimes envy Taiga's freedom and openness, while Taiga always liked to tease Manami, and every time he looked at her intently, it made Manami blush and her heart pound. The first lesson ended, and Manami assigned Taiga homework, making it clear that she would check it next time. Taiga politely thanked Manami for teaching, which made Manami find her value again, because before that, she had never received such thanks from students. At the end of the lesson, the blind date suggested that the two families meet at the weekend. Unfortunately, Manami had a lesson with Taiga on Saturday, so she changed the meeting time to Sunday. In the second lesson, Manami carefully chose a suitable pencil to give to Taiga. Unexpectedly, Taiga had already begun to implement his strategy to hook Manami, first deliberately irritating her, and then responding with gentleness. Taiga made excuses that he was busy with work and didn't have time to do homework, and when studying, he also showed a frivolous and indifferent attitude, and even asked Manami to visit his bar to help him increase sales. Manami felt that she was being teased and angrily turned around and left. Taiga picked up the pencil Manami dropped on the ground. Remembering the painful childhood memories of being surrounded by friends and scolded as a fool, and being scolded by his mother as useless. When he returned to the dorm, he seriously completed the homework Manami assigned and sent it to Manami. Manami received the envelope and was about to open it when she suddenly remembered Taiga's previous indecent words, and her anger flared up again. She directly threw the letter into the trash can. The families met at the weekend. Manami's strong father rectified the blind date, teaching him that, as a man, he shouldn't think about a comfortable life, but should try to work until he vomits blood. Manami's mother hurriedly smoothed things over, saying that her husband just didn't know how to joke. Manami's father immediately criticized his wife for not having the right to interfere. Manami's mother, although embarrassed, was used to being treated like this by her husband, and each time she could only rely on arranging office supplies to soothe her mood. When saying goodbye, the blind date hugged Manami inviting her to the hotel next Saturday. Manami excused herself by saying that she had to go to her best friend's house on Saturday. Rejecting him, the blind date began to suspect, and on Saturday morning, he and his lover ambushed in the car, secretly following Manami. He saw that Manami had indeed gone to her best friend's house. But after Manami left her best friend's house, she suddenly remembered the letter Taiga sent her, and ran back to school, frantically searching through the trash. When she saw that the entire page in the letter was neatly written with the homework she had assigned, a feeling of tenderness suddenly welled up in Manami's heart. Because of self-blame and regret, Manami went to Taiga's bar, hesitating about whether to go in or not. Taiga's colleague saw Manami. He immediately kneeled down and thanked her for coming to boost sales for Taiga. This scene was seen by the blind date, who was secretly following. He couldn't believe that a conservative Manami dared to visit a male hostess club, and he was even more surprised that she called Taiga by name. Taiga was overjoyed to see Manami and earnestly said that if she wasn't used to the noisy atmosphere here, she could go back. But Manami put on a show of going big, ordering a bottle of champagne that cost as much as 50,000 yen just to support Taiga. As soon as she ordered, a male hostess shouted, "Welcome, madam." All the male hostesses stood up and bowed, shouting in unison, "Warm welcome." At this moment, the wealthy woman also came to the bar. Taiga rushed out to serve her. Both the woman and Manami recognized each other, because the two had met in the hotel elevator last time. The woman immediately proposed to close the deal for Taiga, buying 10 sets of custom-made champagne, with a total value of more than 3 million yen, causing a stir in the bar. The male hostesses rushed up to thank the big shot madam for being generous. The woman also declared imposingly that she would definitely help Taiga become the best-selling star and demanded that Taiga perform to amuse her. Taiga did his best to make a show, making jokes, but constantly stumbling, making a fool of himself. The woman publicly scolded him as a fool, saying that his current performance was far from enough, and he had to show his true talent. Taiga recalled the scene of being scolded as a fool by his friends and mother when he was young, but he could only try to suppress his humiliation and continue to perform the clown show. Manami really couldn't stand it anymore and angrily stood up to leave, but was stopped by the woman. The woman said that it was the bar's founding anniversary, so she forced Manami to say a few congratulatory words. Manami was silent for a moment and seriously said one sentence: "Taiga is not a fool." After running out of the male hostess bar, the frustration in Manami's heart was still difficult to quell. Taiga chased after her at this time, hugging her tightly with a look full of affection. Manami was startled and pushed Taiga away, looking panicked. Taiga looked at her and said sincerely, "Even if Manami is lying, I am very happy. From childhood to adulthood, too many people have scolded me as a fool, and only Manami believes that I am not." Manami immediately listed Taiga's strengths, her firm tone proving that she wasn't lying, and each sentence showed recognition for Taiga. Taiga was moved by this sincerity, and in a moment of emotion, he asked Manami to go to a hotel, frankly saying that since becoming a male hostess, he had never slept with a customer, but he was willing to make an exception for Manami. Manami felt insulted and immediately retorted, "I'm not a customer who craves your beauty, nor am I a frivolous woman." Seeing that Manami was about to explode with anger, Taiga quickly restrained himself, awkwardly changing the subject, saying that he would seriously complete his homework, begging Manami to continue teaching him. Although Manami wasn't completely relieved of her anger, she ultimately didn't refuse the lessons, nodding in agreement. On the other side, after witnessing Manami going home, the blind date pretended to call to inquire. The next day, he went to Manami's best friend, lying that he had accidentally seen Manami visit a male hostess bar, and then asked indirectly if Manami had a habit of finding male hostesses. The best friend explained that Manami went to the male hostess bar to investigate a student's affairs and sharply exposed that the blind date didn't accidentally meet, but deliberately followed. Seeing this, the blind date offered gifts to bribe the best friend to keep it a secret, but the best friend turned around and told Manami everything, also advising her that since she was about to get married anyway, it was best to have less contact with male hostesses, let alone that male hostess bars were inherently complicated and their character was difficult to guarantee. Manami was unhappy that her friend spoke ill of Taiga and angrily accused her friend of interfering in her affairs just to show her superiority in front of her. The two each had their own opinions, argued, and went home unhappily. After that, Manami actively made an appointment to meet the blind date, frankly asking him why he was following her. The blind date argued that it was inevitable that he would worry about his future wife going to such an indecent place. And he also suspected that Manami liked the male hostess named Taiga. Manami emphasized that the relationship between her and Taiga wasn't as he thought. and she couldn't accept his lack of trust, suggesting that they both should calm down first, and the matter of marriage should be postponed. To help Taiga learn better despite his dyslexia, Manami searched everywhere for ways to teach children with similar difficulties, and then personally drew a set of comics that were both easy to understand and adorable. Yet, on the day of their appointment on the rooftop, she waited and waited, but Taiga didn't show up. At that moment, her best friend called. As a reporter, she was investigating a case involving male hostesses receiving favors from customers and had coincidentally discovered that Taiga's boss had been in prison and was suspected of being involved in organized crime. She was very worried and urged Manami. That male hostess bar is really dangerous. You should stay away from Taiga? Manami thanked her friend, but became even more worried. The bar was chaotic, and she couldn't contact Taiga, so she finally decided to run straight there. Seeing Taiga still serving customers as usual, she breathed a sigh of relief, then inexplicably felt a little disappointed. At that moment, Taiga's competitor saw her coming and sidled up to her, smirking and bad-mouthing. He deliberately disappeared to attract customers. "You're just a fat prey in his eyes." Manami was furious and retorted. "I knew what he was thinking from the beginning. I just wanted to see how he was going to deceive me. So I played along until now." After speaking, blood rushed to her head, and she turned to shout loudly, "Order whatever Taiga likes. I'll pay for everything today." A colleague whispered to Taiga, "Just 50 man more is enough to reach the top sales revenue this month." Taiga was confident that the top spot was within his grasp, but unexpectedly, he was finally surpassed by that guy, only coming in second. Manami didn't know how to comfort him when the bill was brought out. 51 man and several tens of thousands of yen. She froze. Taiga put on an innocent face. "Huh, didn't you say I could order whatever I wanted?" Looking at him, Manami could only smile sadly. That's just the essence of a male hostess. The boss, knowing what happened, called Taiga up and scolded him thoroughly. "What kind of business is it if you're a male hostess and you make the customer both lose money and feel resentful? From now on, you're forbidden from serving that kid ever again. You're not good enough to be the #1 star yet." When she got home, Manami was shocked to find a matchmaker sitting drinking tea with her parents. He insisted on marrying her immediately, and before leaving, he deliberately kissed her loudly on the cheek in front of her parents to show off. Waiting for a private moment, she dared to confide in her father that she was very hesitant about getting married. Her father just smiled. Hesitation is normal. Hesitation proves that you are living a happy life. From childhood to adulthood, Manami had always been a well-behaved child, listening obediently. For the first time in her life, looking at her father's "of course it should be" expression, she suddenly wondered, should I explode and live authentically once? At the same time, Taiga went to his mother and stepfather's barbershop. He had long guessed that his mother kept asking him for money because she was being forced by stepfather. He sternly warned his stepfather, "Don't let my mother come to me for money again." His mother was embarrassed, not knowing how to lie, but his stepfather was unconcerned. "Lend me another 300 man, you'll have it right away after you serve a few more rich women." Taiga coldly refused. He knew clearly that this house was already a bottomless pit, and no matter how much he gave, it wouldn't be enough. When he got back to his apartment, Taiga suddenly missed Manami intensely. He texted her to meet, and then returned all 520 man, saying directly, "Thank you, but from now on, let's just stop here." Manami panicked and held him back. "I don't want you to give up, no matter what. I still want to continue teaching you." Taiga looked at her and sighed. "You like me, don't you?" "I like you too. Actually, I decided a long time ago not to like anyone anymore, but meeting you, I have to admit defeat." Manami blushed and avoided his gaze. "Don't talk about those things. I just want to be normal teacher and student." Taiga laughed at her stubbornness. Finally, he collected his complex emotions, sat down, picked up the pen, and for the first time diligently wrote each stroke under Manami's guidance. On the other side, the blind date, after being coldly treated by Manami, sought out her best friend, asking her to be a bridge to apologize to Manami, hoping she would reconsider. The best friend didn't stand on ceremony and asked him directly if he had done anything shady. Usually, the one who is always suspicious of others cheating is the one who has a guilty conscience. The blind date had to confess that he had a girlfriend before, but because he was about to marry Manami, he broke up. After hearing this, the best friend scolded him for being a terrible person, warning him to go and confess everything to Manami himself. The blind date quickly made an appointment to meet Manami, actively admitting that he had lied and that after getting engaged to Manami, he still met with his ex, but had now broken up completely. Manami also frankly told him that she knew Taiga through a student and was now teaching him. In the process of helping Taiga, she felt that she herself was also growing. The blind date carefully reminded her that Taiga was, after all, a male hostess, and as a teacher, Manami should pay attention to her influence, lest she be misunderstood. Manami outwardly said that the relationship between her and Taiga wasn't as people thought, but in her heart, she knew clearly that this was just an excuse to hide her uncontrollable feelings for Taiga. The next time she went to teach Taiga, Manami brought the assistant homeroom teacher. The assistant teacher was more knowledgeable about dyslexia than she was and could guide Taiga more professionally. But Taiga only wanted to be alone with Manami, so he immediately announced that class was canceled today, dragging Manami to the bookstore to buy books. Taiga's male hostess colleague entertained the assistant teacher, and the two, with vastly different professions, surprisingly hit it off. The assistant teacher suddenly confessed, saying he was attracted to male hostesses. The male hostess thought he was joking, unaware that the assistant teacher was actually gay. Taiga and Manami went to the bookstore, and Manami suggested easy-to-read books. Taiga deliberately chose the book-liking old-fashioned styles to tease Manami. The two joked around in the bookstore, stopping only when the staff reminded them. Leaving the bookstore, Taiga bought 2 children's books and took Manami to visit his younger brother. His younger brother wanted him to read a story, and Taiga read haltingly, remaining self-conscious despite Manami's constant encouragement. After taking his younger brother home, Taiga didn't say much to Manami and went straight back to the male hostess bar to work. Before long, Taiga was sought out by Manami's best friend. She had heard from the blind date that Manami was teaching Taiga and asked him if he really wanted to learn or if he had other intentions. Taiga didn't answer directly, and just as a customer called for his service, he took the opportunity to slip away from the question. The scheming blind date, on the other hand, turned around and tattled to Manami's parents. He even pretended to be kind, saying that Manami was naive and only thinking about teaching a male hostess, and definitely didn't like him. Hearing this, Manami's father ordered his wife to go meet with Taiga that night to negotiate. This scene was seen by the best friend, who hadn't yet left the area around the male hostess bar. Manami's mother found Taiga, offered him a sum of money, and, at her husband's command, fabricated that Manami was tired of him, hoping that Taiga would stay away from Manami, that the two were not a good match, and that forcing them to be together wouldn't be happy. Taiga pushed the money back, neither agreeing nor refusing, and instead advised Manami's mother to stay at the bar and enjoy herself. Manami's mother went home drunk and collapsed on the floor, making a scene. Seeing this, Manami's father scolded her for being shameless. The mother, who had never dared to argue, suddenly exploded and counterattacked. Her husband is an old fossil, who even uses such outdated words anymore. At this time, Manami was at school, advising the former male hostess-obsessed female student about studying abroad, completely unaware that her house was in chaos. After seeing the female student and her mother off, Manami was filled with a sense of accomplishment, finally helping her find her learning goals again. But turning around, he heard Taiga calling him, unexpectedly coming to the school to find him. The two talked through the school fence. Taiga was still stung by the phrase, suitable match from earlier in the day, looking at the school gate as a barrier between him and Manami. He said he didn't want to play the teacher-student game anymore, saying he hated Manami, but unable to stop himself from holding his hand. The two looked at each other through the fence, their ambiguity and feelings unhidden in their eyes, unaware that this scene was being watched by the assistant homeroom teacher passing by and the female student who had returned to get her phone. Taiga wanted to end things with Manami, but before that, he hoped he would agree to his request to go on a farewell trip. On the day of departure, Manami wore a beautiful dress and boarded a ship with Taiga. Taiga sat next to her, teasing her occasionally, and the two joked sweetly. A student sitting next to them thought they were a real couple and teased them for showing affection in public. To enjoy a pure date, the two turned off their phones, dedicating the whole day to each other. They wrote wishes on the prayer board at the resort and played the teacher-student game at the children's outdoor learning tables and chairs. Taiga confessed, saying that he longed to go to school as a child but couldn't learn to read, and no one helped him, gradually becoming deeply insecure. Manami also shared a secret, that years ago, she had followed her ex-boyfriend and was taken to the police station, and in despair, she jumped into the sea, fortunately being rescued. The honest conversation drew the two hearts closer. Manami suddenly felt that those embarrassing pasts were like wind blowing away, leaving no scars in his heart. At dinner, the two talked about family. Taiga still didn't know who his biological father was, and was always envious that Manami had a wealthy father. Manami smiled bitterly, saying that his father was respected at work, but was a tyrant at home, treating his mother badly. He even wished he didn't have a wealthy life, only wanting a gentle father. But to Taiga, this sounded like why don't they eat cake? Having lived at the bottom of society for so many years, He knew too well how much a lack of money tortured people. He thought Manami didn't understand the suffering of the world. Manami realized that Taiga had suddenly turned cold. But fortunately, this small misunderstanding didn't last long and didn't affect the dating atmosphere. After eating, the two played hide-and-seek on the street. Manami often secretly followed Taiga, quietly admiring him. When Taiga suddenly disappeared, she frantically searched. Just as she was at the height of worry, Taiga jumped out from behind, hugging her tightly. The two went to the beach, and Taiga wrote the two words teacher in large letters on the sand. As the moment of farewell grew closer, the longing of both also reached its peak. Taiga wanted to dispel the sadness of parting. So he bragged that he had kissed countless women, but would not kiss Manami. Manami saw through the sadness behind his bravado and couldn't help but burst into tears. Taiga suddenly imagined the two of them running away together, at which point they would just be a normal couple struggling to make a living at the bottom of society. Manami joked, that kind of poor life would definitely be terrible. Taiga blurted out, at least they would be happy. That sentence completely shattered Manami's psychological defenses, and he took the initiative to move closer and kiss Taiga. After the kiss ended, the two held hands and walked back to the train station. Taiga decided to break up right there, taking off his couple's hat and exchanging it with Manami's. Leaving the last memory, the two agreed to count down 3 hours and then turn their backs, neither allowed to look back. Manami walked away as agreed, but Taiga turned around, looking at Manami's receding figure, imagining himself shouting his name and chasing after him. In reality, he could only stand still, letting tears of sadness roll down his face. Manami, unable to bear it, turned around halfway, discovering that Taiga's figure had disappeared into the crowd. She forced herself to calm down, return to reality, and turn on her phone, seeing several missed calls from school. The assistant homeroom teacher had also sent a text message, saying that the female student who had seen him and Taiga holding hands at the school gate had spread the story. And now many parents were questioning whether she was qualified to be a teacher. Manami called the school back, and in the midst of the chaos, the couple's hat she had exchanged was blown away by the wind. She chased after it desperately, but it was too late. At the same time, the blind date suddenly appeared next to Taiga. His face was full of mockery, blaming Taiga for using all sorts of tricks to seduce Manami, only to squeeze money out of him. Taiga laughed in response. I'm best at love. That calm demeanor infuriated the blind date. He rushed forward and punched Taiga. Taiga, caught off guard, staggered and fell, rolling down the nearby stairs, fainting on the spot. Manami hurriedly returned to school, where 3 representative parents were angrily criticizing her for having an affair with a male hostess, not being worthy of being a teacher. Manami explained that he was only teaching him basic knowledge, and that this meeting was also to sever the relationship. But the female student's mother still wouldn't let go, forcing Manami to write a pledge, swearing that she would have nothing to do with male hostesses from now on. Manami helplessly had to yield to society, writing as required. The blind date ran away in a panic. Taiga was taken to the hospital by medical personnel. The police investigated the reason for Taiga's fall down the stairs. He didn't want to implicate Manami, so he fabricated that he had fallen on his own, not involving anyone. The blind date didn't know that Taiga was covering up because he cared for Manami, only worrying that his actions would be revealed, and was restless day and night. Finally, unable to bear the torment, he made an appointment with Manami to probe the situation. Manami thought he was still jealous of Taiga, and frankly said that he had completely broken up. Seeing that Manami showed nothing strange, the blind date secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Manami returned home, intending to sort out her chaotic emotions. Her father suddenly exposed the matter of finding a male hostess, scolding her for being depraved, difficult to achieve great success, and threatening that if she still hesitated and lingered, he would personally deal with that male hostess. Manami was dissatisfied with her father's dictatorship, had a big argument, and rushed out of the house. She called Taiga, confessing that the relationship between the two had been discovered by his family, which could cause trouble for the male hostess bar. Taiga coldly replied, I know, and then forced himself to hang up. He was afraid that if he said anything more, his longing and affection for Manami would be completely revealed. Manami sadly told her best friend, both unwilling to yield to reality and yearning for Taiga. Her best friend advised him, saying that being obsessed with male hostesses would ultimately only harm herself, but if she insisted on throwing herself into the fire, she would support her. Manami walked as if lost in a fog, no longer seeing the road ahead clearly. Little did she know that the police had completely ignored Taiga's testimony and were still secretly investigating his fall down the stairs. The previous stabbing incident was still unsolved, and now Taiga had fallen, so the police suspected that someone had intentionally pushed him. So, They went to the shop to inquire with the boss, also handing over a photo and instructing. If the person in the photo appears, you must report it to the police immediately. Standing nearby, the shop's top earner, who was Taiga's biggest rival, overheard the entire conversation. Afterward, he ran straight to the hospital to visit Taiga, telling him everything about the police coming to the shop to inquire, suspecting that the fall down the stairs was related to the previous stabbing incident. Taiga had to admit that it was true that someone had pushed him, but it had nothing to do with the shop, and he had only remained silent because he cared about that person. In return, the top earner revealed a secret. "I'm being followed." Taiga seriously asked for details, but he just laughed it off, just being followed by a girl. But as soon as he stepped out of the hospital room, his face immediately darkened, his eyes complex, as if hiding something he couldn't say. Manami's best friend was still working hard to investigate the stabbing incident, even planning to do a feature story on male hostesses. Every time she came to the shop, the person who received her was that top earner. When she asked why she hadn't seen Taiga, she learned that he had been pushed down the stairs at the beach and was in the hospital. She immediately called to inform Manami. And just at that moment, Manami had just returned from a blind date. The blind date blamed her for being cold and distant with him, but for looking at Taiga at the train station with super love-struck eyes. He let it slip and was shocked, and Manami only realized that he had followed them to the beach. Even if he explained, "I was just worried about you," Manami still felt that the beautiful memories at the beach had been completely tainted. Hearing her best friend report that Taiga had been pushed down the stairs, Manami immediately suspected that it was the blind date who had done it. She hurriedly called Taiga, who denied it. "I'm working at the shop here." But the very next second, Taiga looked downstairs. Manami was standing there. Hearing her voice on the other end, Taiga gritted his teeth, thinking it was better to have short-term pain than long-term pain, and coldly said, "Don't contact me anymore after this." Manami understood that Taiga was trying to push her back to a normal life by lying. She didn't want to disappoint him and decided to force herself to live well. Returning home, she told her parents directly that she wanted to move out and live alone, wanting to take control of her life at the age of 35. Moving out, Manami temporarily stayed at her best friend's house, coincidentally watching the news. She saw a report about a stabbing incident at the male hostess bar Dying Chu. Her heart skipped a beat, afraid that something had happened to Taiga, and she immediately rushed to the scene. The storefront was in complete chaos. Just as she was about to inquire, her best friend saw her and ran over to say the stabber was aiming for the top earner, but luckily a colleague took the knife for him, only getting injured in the hand, not in danger. She also urged, "Go home, don't get involved with those male hostesses anymore." Just as she finished speaking, Taiga had already seen Manami's figure. He was both scolding, "Why did you come to this place?" and grinning, "Worried about me?" Manami denied it vehemently. But before she could finish speaking, she felt dizzy and fell. Taiga quickly carried Manami back to her best friend's house. Her best friend happened to have to go and dig up more information about the top earner stabbing, so she had to ask Taiga to stay and take care of the feverish Manami. Taiga gently put a towel on her forehead. When Manami woke up, she saw Taiga lying on the floor, lamenting, "I thought the breakup at the beach was really over, but who knew fate would play such a trick on us? That's why I don't dare to like anyone. Once I like someone, I get involved in all sorts of things." Manami said that she was about to move out and live alone, that she had never disobeyed her father in her life, but that she was 35 years old now and had to be independent. Taiga smiled. "Good luck, you can do it." When Manami woke up again, Taiga had already left, only leaving on the kitchen table a hot meal and a clumsily written note. Manami imagined Taiga sitting and writing the words, which were sure to be very ugly, and her heart warmed all over, carefully folding the paper and putting it in her wallet like a treasure. Now the shop was closed for good, but Taiga still came on time every day, asking the boss if there was anything he needed to do. A year ago, when Taiga was still wandering the streets and alleys and was surrounded and beaten by hoodlums, the boss had chased him away and given him a job at the shop. Taiga was always grateful. The boss sighed and said that he used to be a male hostess too, and when he had a lover and wanted to quit, the manager wouldn't let him, and a fight accidentally killed a colleague. He spent a few years in prison, and after getting out, he opened the shop and set a rule for himself. Whenever there's a death involved, close down and retreat immediately. So, when Taiga asked when he would reopen, he just remained silent, not answering. The police quickly caught the culprit who had tried to assassinate the top earner, but had mistakenly injured the other male hostesses. It turned out to be the wealthy woman who had been greeted so warmly by all the male hostesses. The stabbing incident before was also caused by her. The wealthy woman tearfully recounted that she spent money lavishly only to find someone who was sincere with her. But the male hostesses only knew money. When she encountered financial difficulties and her spending decreased suddenly, Their attitude immediately changed 180 degrees, even mocking her as an old woman. In the midst of the argument, she accidentally killed the other person, fortunately escaping punishment. She then embezzled public funds to support the top earner. This top earner was a friend of the deceased victim, knew exactly what she had done, but still pretended to be affectionate to get money. Later, the embezzlement was exposed, and she had no more money. The look in the top earner's eyes toward her was full of contempt, as if looking at something dirty. The wealthy woman didn't expect that she had thrown money away like trash time and time again, but couldn't even get basic respect in return, and in anger, she wielded a knife and stabbed the top earner, but unfortunately, someone blocked it. A few days after the matter was resolved, the boss announced that the male hostess bar would reopen. All the male hostesses, including Taiga, were excited to go to work. But the boss said that this would be the last time they did business, hoping that everyone would have fun and leave behind beautiful memories. Taiga couldn't change the truth and could only try his best to serve every customer who came to him well. Unexpectedly, the male hostess's farewell party was interrupted by the police. The police used the reason that the male hostess bar had violated business custom laws, taking the boss away. Taiga and several other high-earning male hostesses also had to accept interrogation. Manami's best friend told her the story, urging her that the matter had reached the police station and that she should absolutely not get involved with Taiga anymore. Manami agreed, but in her heart, she still worried about Taiga incessantly. After the interrogation, the police asked Taiga to sign the statement. He intended to quickly write his name and be done with it. But the police seriously reminded him that this statement could be used as evidence later and that he couldn't be careless, that he had to read it carefully before confirming. Taiga was embarrassed and didn't dare to admit that he had dyslexia, so he had to hold a statement and try to recognize each word with difficulty. News of the male hostess bar being investigated spread to the school. The principal immediately reminded him that he should absolutely not be involved with male hostesses. But the assistant homeroom teacher thought differently. He supported the feelings between Manami and Taiga, perhaps because his own love life wasn't going smoothly. So he especially couldn't bear to see the two leave regrets. He told Manami that people with dyslexia may not be able to read on their own, and when faced with a police statement, they might only know how to sign according to what others say, ultimately easily suffering losses, advising him to go help Taiga. Manami had already decided not to meet Taiga again, but hearing what the assistant teacher said, he finally couldn't rest easy and ran to the police station to explain Taiga's situation, asking the police to give him more time. They asked about the relationship between him and Taiga, and Manami hesitated for a moment, then frankly said they were friends and gave his name. This conversation was coincidentally heard by Taiga's mother. She found Manami, warning him not to interfere in other people's affairs, that even if he helped Taiga this time, his life wouldn't change in essence, and that sometimes pity was even more cruel. Manami explained that he wasn't doing it out of pity, only not wanting Taiga to lose confidence. After hearing what the mother told Taiga about Manami's help, Taiga's heart was in a mess, not knowing whether it was touched or some other emotion. Returning to the dorm, his colleague was packing up to go home. Taiga couldn't bear to part so hastily, deciding to throw a farewell party for his colleague. He and his colleague went out shopping. Unexpectedly, Manami was on his way to find him at this time. Manami waited on the rooftop for a long time, the moments the two had spent together flashing through his mind. Finally, he picked up a pen and wrote 2 words on the wall. Around this time, Manami found a new house and moved in, but unexpectedly, the first guest to arrive was the matchmaker. He took the initiative to propose canceling the engagement. Recently, Manami's father, as a high-ranking leader, had been accused by his subordinates of workplace bullying. Many people sided with the employees, leading to her father being suspended from work and possibly even being fired. The matchmaker had told his parents all the things Manami's father had done at the company, so they didn't force the marriage anymore. He himself also gradually realized that his feelings for Manami were more of an obsession than love. He confessed to the story of him previously hitting Taiga unconscious, not expecting that Taiga, in order not to involve Manami, would conceal his bad behavior. The matchmaker understood that this was true love, advising Manami not to miss Taiga. Afterwards, the matchmaker ran to find Taiga, stuffing Manami's address into his hand, explaining that he had broken up with Manami peacefully, and encouraging Taiga to bravely pursue happiness. Taiga hesitated in his heart and went to the roof to get some air. He unexpectedly saw the 2 words "good luck" written by Manami, realizing that she had once come to find him. He followed the address and found Manami's house, but she just happened to be out shopping and wasn't home. He lay on a nearby bench, soaking up the sun. Before long, he heard Manami's voice coming from the other side. He stood up and stepped over the stone bridge, walking towards her. The two bought ice cream shoulder to shoulder, quietly staying together, The sunlight fell on them, and the joy from the bottom of their hearts was a peace that they had not felt for a long time. Manami led Taiga to her house, and the two ate instant noodles together, the atmosphere warm and comfortable. While eating, Taiga received a phone call from a customer, and he was still using sweet, ambiguous words to coax her as before. Manami was annoyed listening. She asked Taiga what he planned to do in the future, and if he still wanted to be a male hostess. Taiga thought that besides this job, he had no qualifications, and it was difficult for him to read and write. So he couldn't do anything else. Manami muttered that as long as he wanted to, he could try anything. Turning her head, she saw that he had fallen asleep. Manami drew the curtains and put a blanket on Taiga. Looking at his face, she knew that she had fallen into a trap with no escape. Taiga pretended to be asleep, holding her hand and playing mischievously like a child. Manami thought to herself, "What can I do about being in love, even if it's painful? I'll just have to bear it." When Taiga was about to leave, Manami took the initiative to suggest that he move in with her. Taiga was worried that his identity as a male hostess would affect Manami, especially her work. Manami frankly said that even if no one blessed them, they weren't breaking any laws, and she would tell the school herself that the two were dating. Taiga didn't agree and angrily left. Manami was sad when Taiga suddenly opened the door, stuttering that he would find a job other than being a male hostess, and they would live together once he found one. Manami was overjoyed. Arriving at school, she immediately confessed to the principal that she was in love with Taiga. The principal reminded her that she had once written a pledge to parents that she would cut ties with male hostesses. Now, if she persisted, there was no other option but to fire her. Manami stood on the podium one last time, wistfully remembering the faces of each student, finally quietly leaving when the class was empty. Manami's father was transferred by the parent company to a branch, but he wasn't willing to accept it, vowing that one day he would return and overthrow those who had harmed him. He hoped that the matchmaker would also cheer up and not give up on Manami. The matchmaker endured the anger of Manami's father, admitting that he had brought Manami and Taiga together. He thought that Manami had lived in a controlled environment since she was a child and longed for freedom and comfort, and that Taiga had those qualities. So it was inevitable that the two would come together. He hoped that Manami's father would change his mind and not view their relationship with class prejudice. Returning home, Manami's father rushed into his daughter's room. He couldn't accept that his beloved daughter had been ruined by a male hostess and angrily stomped on the hat that Taiga had given Manami to vent his anger. Taiga didn't know that Manami's father knew about their love. He was diligently practicing his writing at home, hoping to find a job soon. His mother unexpectedly came, wanting to leech money before he spent all the money he had made as a male hostess. Taiga didn't want to be leeched off of by her anymore and asked who his biological father was. Seeing that she refused to say, he asked her not to look for him anymore, that he wanted to live a new life. Unable to get money, the mother angrily scolded him and left. Taiga went to Manami's house, where her best friend happened to be. The best friend didn't want to be a third wheel, and as she left, she warned Taiga that if he dared to play with Manami's feelings, she wouldn't let him off. Taiga was planning to interview at a restaurant, a place that didn't require qualifications, and asked Manami to guide him in writing his resume. Manami said that the two should write together because she also needed to find a new job after quitting her job at school. Taiga didn't accept that he had caused her to lose her job. He blamed Manami for not skillfully hiding the matter, while Manami wanted to date publicly. The two argued. Suddenly, the power went out in the room. Taiga hugged Manami to turn on the circuit breaker, accidentally falling backward onto the floor, creating an ambiguous atmosphere. Manami confessed that she just wanted to be with him. Taiga panicked and stood up, asking her to teach him how to write, and then wrote on paper he also wanted to be with Manami. The two confessed in this way, and the atmosphere gradually became sweeter. Taiga couldn't help himself and took off Manami's glasses, intending to kiss her. At the crucial moment, Manami's father suddenly burst in. He angrily pushed Taiga to the ground, scolding him for ruining his daughter's life. Taiga tried to restrain himself, releasing his fist. Manami's father proudly proclaimed that Taiga had to quit his job as a male hostess, find a decent job to support himself, and only if he truly made an effort would he hand over Manami. Getting recognition from her father, Manami was so happy that she cried. Taiga swore that he would make something of himself so that Manami's father would look at him in a different light. At the request of Manami's father, Taiga studied diligently, preparing to take the exam to get into a beauty shop, determined to become a barber. Manami was always by his side, teaching him patiently, only hoping that he would put all his effort into their future. Taiga seriously swore that this time he had to change completely, and if he failed the exam, he would end the relationship. Manami thought he was joking and didn't care. On the day Taiga went to take the exam, Manami ran over to Taiga's mother's house to play. Unexpectedly, she witnessed Taiga's mother and the uncle she was living with fighting fiercely. The uncle became furious and demanded to break up immediately. Manami kindly helped her aunt clean up the house that was as ravaged as after a storm, while also informing her that Taiga was sitting in the exam room, fighting his best. The aunt didn't really believe that her son would pass, but she sincerely thanked Manami for always being there, not leaving Taiga's side, also asking her to continue taking care of this stupid kid for her. In the exam room, Taiga sat scratching his head over the pile of questions. The bell rang to hand in the paper, but his essay still wasn't finished. Fortunately, he did well in the interview, so he still had a glimmer of hope. After finishing the exam, he rushed out of the gate, and in the middle of the crowd, Taiga excitedly hugged Manami and spun her around several times, only hoping that the results would come out soon. A few days later, the results were announced. Taiga failed. Manami immediately ran over to comfort him, advising that next time he should just frankly declare that he had dyslexia so he could ask for a reduced difficulty exam. But Taiga had already been beaten to a pulp by reality, and that saying "break up if I don't pass" from before wasn't a joke. He couldn't bear Manami's expectant gaze anymore, afraid that he would never pass, afraid that Manami would eventually despise him. Manami swore that she would be by his side until Taiga passed, but Taiga used the last bit of his self-respect to push Manami out the door, telling her to go live her own life and not waste her time on the pile of trash that was him. Manami's parents also followed the results, and knowing that Taiga had failed, her mother told her husband not to be too harsh, that the kid had already tried his best anyway. The father still bitterly called him mud that can't be plastered on a wall. Manami's mother, hearing her husband insult the person her daughter cherished, couldn't bear it and angrily demanded a divorce. The father panicked. Afterwards, the father took the initiative to find his daughter, returning the hat that Taiga had given her and that he had previously stomped on, apologizing for treating her like property all these years and wanting to control everything. After her father left, Manami hugged the hat and sobbed. At the same time, Taiga was drunk at a bar, thinking that only this noisy, artificial atmosphere was where he belonged. After the party, he lay alone on the roof, crying, longing to change but unable to integrate into society. Finally, he returned the apartment and dragged his suitcase, leaving the city. Manami emerged from the pain and found a job as a teacher again. Her mother also switched to working full-time, going to work on time every day. The father, wanting to save his marriage, began to learn how to do housework, clumsily but sincerely, and the mother secretly rejoiced in her heart. In a flash, 6 years passed, and Manami returned to the beach where she had played with Taiga years ago to attend a fireworks festival. She stopped by the old restaurant, asking about the umbrella she had left behind 6 years ago. The restaurant owner returned the umbrella, also handing over a letter that Taiga had left. In the letter, Taiga said that he was doing very well and always remembered her. The letter was only half written, as if it were unfinished. Manami asked the reason, and the owner laughed. "Go ask the writer yourself." Manami's heart pounded, and she ran out to the beach, and sure enough, she saw the person she had been thinking about day and night, Taiga. He said that he had decided to take the exam again, and after several years of diligent study, he was sure to pass this time. Manami took out the letter, pointing out, "The word love is missing a stroke." Taiga picked up a wooden stick, writing the words, "Love you," all over the sand, and then threw the stick away, rushing forward to hug Manami and kiss her passionately. The movie ends. All right, that's all for today, everyone. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the movie channel. Bye-bye, everyone.